Welcome everyone. This is the Pop Astrologist Presents, my unofficial attempt at a YouTube channel because it's been long enough and, we can't really rely on TikTok being here. Am I right? So I'm so incredibly happy, honored, and humbled to have Camille Michelle Gray, the one and only gifted astrologer, loyal public servant, and all around badass, honestly. Welcome.
Thank you, Tasha. I'm so happy to be back talking with you.
Oh my gosh, yes. And the reason why I really wanted Camille to ring in this new era with me is because we had previously collaborated on a very special Kendrick and Drake episode about a year, well, almost a year ago now.
Yeah.
The part one of the beef, I guess.
Yeah.
And we thought it might be fun to revisit, update, remix. Okay, so this is, working it out on the remix, Kendrick and Drake
Mhm.
style. And a lot has happened. And so, what I'm hoping to accomplish with this episode is this is the deepest Astro, Kendrick, Drake dive you will ever need. And hopefully it's educational. All right. It was certainly very entertaining for me going through the research, going through the black hole of notes. But any initial thoughts from your end, my dear, before we jump right into Kendrick's chart to start?
I am just shocked and excited by the duration of this entire saga. I can't believe it's almost a year later and this is still highly relevant and it's so astrologically good. So I can't wait to
Mhm.
get into it.
Oh, it's juicy. It's juicy.
So
And
juicy.
it's so interesting because some people aren't actually like when the Super Bowl happened, of course, and the Kendrick's performance came through. Some people weren't even aware there was a beef going on. And it's like, oh,
Oh,
okay, we got to reopen this whole thing again. So we'll definitely get to a timeline after we get through some charts for people,
yes.
curious about how everything factors into everything. Okay, we are getting here towards, yeah, we'll start with K Dot because he has admittedly, I think, taken the battle, right? Like,
Yeah.
no denying it.
Yeah. Yeah. He's the victor for sure. Look at that Mars in the 10th house.
Yes, spicy. Please give me your highlights of Kendrick's chart. We know he's a Gemini sun, and this is the
We
most
do.
Gemini display I've ever seen,
It
frankly.
is. What I find most interesting about what's going on with Kendrick Lamar now is actually his transits. He's going
Mm,
through a myriad of transits that are exact or very close to exactitude right now. And what that means for the listeners is basically that this is an incredibly potent time for him. And so the first kind of aspect that I wanted to look at is you can see it on the screen, like Saturn is right on top of that Pisces moon. This is traditionally known as like a transit that's quite difficult, but I think if you're willing to do the work and the maturity right around your feelings and coping mechanisms, it can be incredibly fruitful for just setting the foundation for the next chapter of your life. And so the thoughts that came to me for Kendrick Lamar with Saturn on the Pisces moon specifically, it's like, making feelings concrete, taking
mm,
things out of a vague Pisces space and being very explicit about
mm-hmm,
how somebody feels. He is we are clear about how K Dot feels about Drake in a lot of ways. We're clear about how he feels about culture vultures, right, and hip hop in general. So I think Saturn on his Pisces moon is that clarifying force. It's this ask, kind of like, are you going to be passive here? Not that I thought that he was ever passive.
mm-hmm,
Or, right, are you going to do something bold, something loud, and something that can really last the test of time? And so this
mm,
is something I think it put a lot of pressure on him. Like we're not privy, obviously, to what was happening behind the scenes, but it really is this pressure moment of like, are you going to outgrow these older ways of coping, and what does the new way of coping look like? And in
mm-hmm,
his sixth house, I think he poured that directly into his work. And it's
mm.
forming, like it sees the 10th house, right? It sees his legacy, his public aura, right? So it's something that we can witness as well. So I just see this as a really fortifying time. And I love it when transits in reality don't necessarily map on to like the worst case scenario we see in the literature. And I
Mm-hmm.
think Kendrick Lamar, Moon, Saturn conjunct transit is one of these positive examples about like, yes, pressure, but it just depends on how you handle it. And he's handled it
Yeah.
quite well. And so I love to see that for him.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Wow. I really love that. Yes, Saturn moon can be very exhaustive, depressive,
Yes.
all these things we've heard, right? Limiting, frustrating. You know, Saturn does good things too, as you said. Takes
Yeah,
time, however.
absolutely.
And I mean,
Absolutely.
if you think about it, like this was and you said it in a text earlier to me today,
Mhm.
this was the most watched halftime show, right? Like we'll
Mhm.
get to the Super Bowl later, but just even earmarking the fact that Saturn rewards you for hard work over time. What are you
Mhm.
committed to? What do you stand for?
Yeah. And
Right there.
let's be real about it. Like, this is awesome for him, but I imagine the responsibility is a lot. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the work you put into a halftime show, the work you put into promoting an album or creating this tour with SZA. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he is in this grinding phase with Saturn just moving through his sixth house, but he's doing it in a way that's just so mature and humane and just, showcases the best of who he is. And that's why I think it's rewarding. And then I know people are going to think about, but it's a hater anthem. Like, where's the Saturn integrity in that? Um, but I think he's saying something that is beyond just him versus Drake. He's commenting on culture, he's
Mm-hmm.
commenting on appropriation, he's commenting on America's legacy, right? So that's why I think generally this is like a really generative time for him, despite the
Mm-hmm.
fact that he's probably and is under a lot of pressure to perform or to
Mm-hmm.
do his work in some kind of demonstrable way. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really love that. I mean, here's the thing. Yes, Saturn is all those things, sure, but he's got a Saturn in Sag, right? Like, so
Yeah.
part of his journey, spiritual journey here on this lifetime, especially in that third house, it's like
Mm.
identification, right? Like, what do you identify? What cause do you identify with? How will you use your platform to
Yeah.
express yourself, right? The truth, Sag, and the truth.
Yeah.
And it also echoes his Gemini sun and Venus and Chiron conjunction in that ninth house, right? It's a very Sagittarius house if you are a modern astrologer. Um, but nevertheless, it is still very resonant, right? The idea that, hey, I'm working on my truth in this lifetime, Saturn and
Yeah.
Sag, and and it is part of my identity as a storyteller that I'm looking to claim. How do I actually tell the stories that stay truthful to the narrative without losing the plot?
Yeah. And that's the integrity piece. And that's why I
Mm-hmm.
think Saturn is functionally working as like the gift giver here for Kendrick Lamar's career and
Ooh.
his like, like in his skillsmanship and his mastery in this fields. And so I think he's
Mm-hmm.
doing the work that he's been meant to do, like one facet of it at least, which
Mm-hmm.
is again why this has been so fruitful for him, right? Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, he does, speaking of gift giving, right? He does have a Jupiter in Aries that is in his seventh
Yes.
house. It is co-present with his North Node in Aries. And it's been a very, very interesting couple of years for Aries and Libra, considering
Yeah.
the nodes have been in Aries and Libra. So Kendrick has been going through his nodal return. Dun dun dun. Do you have
Yeah.
like a spark notes like summary on like what a nodal return is and why I guess
Yeah.
it's this significant for Kendrick?
I think like the nodal return, imagine like you've been walking a path, and if the universe in some kind of way determines that it's not maybe the path for you, I think the nodal return ends up being this profound shift or pivot point in
Hmm.
like your fate or in like who you're supposed to be and where you're supposed to go. I think we can all kind of like conclusively say this is a huge pivot point in Kendrick Lamar's career. And I can only imagine the interchanges that he's going
Hmm.
through as well. And if you're asking me, I think this was the pivot from being a successful rapper, right, Pulitzer Prize winning rapper, to becoming a cultural behemoth and someone who is reaching Venus on the node, like a wide array
Hmm.
of people, someone who is touching people with their message, right? Not to be like too dramatic, but like a messiah in a lot of ways. Because what he's preaching is like what the world needs to hear right now. So I feel like
Hmm.
again, I said this before, like he's just a healer who happens to be a rapper. But I
Hmm.
feel like this nodal return like definitively put him on this path of like legacy making. Like he's one for the zeitgeist, right? This is a person who will be remembered not only for their rap, but for their like efforts as a human being in some kind of way. I don't know. I feel like it changed him
Mm.
in that capacity. Yeah,
I love it. I mean, hey, Gemini, dual identity, right? Like, which
exactly.
identity is the choice now? Like, you make a choice at a nodal return. Do I
Absolutely.
repeat? Do I choose different? Yeah, it's a very interesting moment. And, you bring up Venus on the North Node. Obviously, you and I are both very aware that Venus is about to begin her retrograde. And I mean, the story's already begun, right? So,
Yeah.
this is almost like a preview of the spring for
Mm.
Kendrick, right? It's
Mhm.
stationing on his nodes. Like, this is a pivotal point, like a pivotal point, time, moment, everything, all the words, Gemini. But is there something that I feel like would have caught you by surprise if you hadn't looked at Kendrick's chart? Anything like surprising about his placements, or is everything kind of like, yep, that checks out. Yep,
It
this
kind of
makes a lot of
does
sense.
actually check out. Yeah. And, while we're talking about the nodes, like it has a south node in Libra in the first house.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say to a client is like your past lives have been kind of informed by a lot of codependency or subservience, right? Keeping everything on an even keel for other people in some kind of way. And
Mm-hmm.
so this North Node in Aries is like, hey, you're going to speak your truth, or you going to assert yourself within these relationship dynamics that previously like entrapped you. And you can see Venus on the North Node ruling the South Node, like when the past meets the present. So that's why I think it's like this critical turning point in him embodying this North Node Aries energy, which is like, hateration. You're actually not like us. You actually can't sit at this table. I'm actually not going to be agreeable. But yeah, I think
Haterade.
he has one of these charts that I think is so evocative in so many ways, and everything makes so much sense. I see nothing really has surprised me about it so far,
Mm-hmm.
actually. It's so like on point, and I love it.
Yes, this is why we love astrology, because it's kind of one of those
Yes.
like, wow, it really tells the story. And again, you can choose what you want to do with the energy in your chart, right? But the way that he is stepping into these archetypes is
Yeah.
really, really powerful. I mean, again, Gemini, the archetype of the storyteller, the messenger, ninth house, the
Yeah.
spiritual messenger, right? And then, you've got Mars in Cancer, Mercury in Cancer. And I think this is something you brought up in our last conversation, home turf, right? And really
Yes.
West Coast and LA, like this is very much part of the identity of this beef, or a factor of it, a major factor of it. So, um, the only reason why I'm bringing up this chart right here is this is, around the time he won at the Grammys. It's not
Okay.
exact time, but you know, the moon was in Aries that night, right? Just to further emphasize like what could potentially be happening. Jupiter has, or was stationing at the time, right, on his Venus in that ninth as well. So if you're thinking
So
about a
good.
true global breakout moment and them sweeping all categories they were nominated for, it's not like us. Also fun fact, Mustard is a Gemini.
I didn't know that. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yes.
His synastry with Kendrick, I bet is
Hold on.
extraordinary.
Hold
Yes,
on.
pull it up.
There it is.
Oh,
Mustard!
look, SZA and Mustard have Jupiter in Cancer lighting up Kendrick Lamar's 10th house. So they're such allies for him on this journey. I
Yes.
love this.
Right? It's like very cute. And look at that, like Mustard's Mars in Aries on the North Node as well. He is an ally in battle together,
Yeah, like let me help you
potentially.
diss this guy. Let
Yeah.
me help you fight.
But it is interesting. They've got a Venus and Pluto opposition
Yeah,
together.
interesting.
Powerful, very
Yeah,
powerful. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure about the whole truth, right? Venus and Pluto, like there's always a lot more there. It's
interesting. I
always
don't know a lot
interesting.
about his relationship with Mustard, but yeah, that would be curious to dive into.
Yeah, I don't
It's an
either.
exact opposition too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of juicy, right? And the 7 degrees, like, if you're a degree theory person, like Libra degree. So again, it's all about balance in a relationship. And you know what? I will say maybe this is interesting. This just came to mind
Mhm.
because, Kendrick brought Mustard out, right? Like when he's doing the victory laps, even at the Super Bowl, like Mustard's like featured front and center, like
Yeah.
part of GNX's, I guess, popular or popularity is, tribute to like the mustard like tagline. So it just feels like there is a bringing up or an elevation in a way like we're partners in this, that maybe in a past life, if I think about the Venus Pluto, there could have been stuff there around
Yeah,
who's
like, you
really,
were
like, in charge.
against me here, and now you're with
Yeah.
me here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very interesting.
Can
Squabble
we
up.
talk about, like, how literal it is to name yourself after a condiment when you have Venus in Taurus?
Dijon.
Yeah,
Dijon,
just naming
sir.
myself after a food item.
Mercury and Taurus. I mean, you really cannot make it up. And I think what it's actually really funny because Sabrina Carpenter, what she's like a Taurus, right? And
Yeah.
espresso. So like if you are a Taurus and you're an artist, like name something of a food. It's gonna
Yes,
be
please.
great. It's gonna be
Yeah.
great. Okay.
Beautiful.
Well, I was gonna say anything else you would like to, any other notes on Kendrick's chart you would like to share? I mean, there's a lot more to dig into, of course, but
Yeah.
this is our foray.
Yeah, the couple other transits, and this ties into his natal chart, is of course he's having this prolonged exact Mars return because
Mm-hmm.
Mars is going to be hanging out at that 17-degree mark. When you see this in
Yes.
a chart, what it basically is an exclamation point and making impact and fireworks on the world stage. So again, this is a really, really huge moment for him in his career with respect to just like everyone's looking at him. But I also think it says something really beautiful about like, the Not Like Us in the wake of this the Super Bowl has been. I've seen like videos on YouTube and Instagram reels of like Native Americans dancing to it, Hispanics dancing to it, Desi Indians dancing to it. And so it's become like a cultural anthem for marginalized people.
Mm-hmm.
And I see them coming together in this way. They're like a rapper from Compton, who knew? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like a celebration of culture. It's an assertion of culture. It's the protection of the culture. Like, no, you're actually not like us in all of these
Mm-hmm.
myriad of ways. And it's kind of like the anthem of people who have been pushed to the sidelines for any number of reasons. And I think that's just so beautiful. And again, it speaks to Kendrick's impact beyond music as someone
Mm-hmm.
who is doing some really, really important work here in the world, just, even beyond his lyricism. So I couldn't help
Yeah.
but to notice that. And the last thing I would say, just to wrap it up, is, Jupiter is the ruler of his Pisces moon. And then like, Mars and Cancer is ruled by I don't know, there's like this closed circuit of energy between his moon, Mars, and Jupiter. They're all answering to one another.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, yeah, Jupiter in Aries in the seventh house, you receive goodwill from the people, even if you're hating on somebody. Like Jupiter makes it buoyant and makes it contagious and makes people want to participate, right, in whatever the beef is or whatever the conflict is. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I think fundamentally this has worked out for him. It's like right on his descendant. Like the people like him. The people are for him in a major,
Mm.
major way. So those are just some of
Yes.
the things that I've seen that are like relevant to this moment in time for his natal
Oh,
chart.
I love that so much. And I
Yeah.
totally agree that Mars in Cancer, Mercury in Cancer, Cancer, the sign of the underdog, Cancer,
Yes,
like literally even the title of it, right? Not like us. It's such a Cancer thing to say, you can't sit with us, you know? And so
exactly.
you're getting this on full display. And in Aries, in a very competitive dynamic, like on the little battlefield, but on the sports field, on the athletic field. And
Oh
then
my
there's like,
God. Yeah.
the PlayStation, okay, in a video
Yes.
game. Very
Yes.
Gemini, very Aries, very competitor, and very like
Yeah.
everyone's like hype because you're rooting for teams, right? It's Jupiter Gemini, like the sides are coming out to play,
Exactly.
right?
Like
Like
verses. Yes.
exactly. And there's a lot of that going on. Like, this is not the only beef out there, Baldoni and Blake, but like, there is
Mm,
a lot of, whose side are you on type of chatter, which I think obviously Jupiter and Gemini, we have a lot to thank you for that.
yeah.
Um,
Also, can I just say, like, you remember when Euphoria dropped and like we were getting like the
mm-hmm,
tracks back to back and how people had so much fun dissecting the meaning? The same thing
mm-hmm.
for the Super Bowl show. He was
Oh my
just
God.
leaving little Gemini breadcrumbs. Like we can participate in his art in a way that's so
Yes.
fun and engaging, and I don't know that I've seen before. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. It's like, okay, Kendrick Lamar is making us connect dots again.
K dot connecting the dots for all of us and bringing
Oh,
community together.
there you go.
I mean, my God, like if there's someone that can bridge, like maybe it's Kendrick, right?
I think so.
But again, speaking about that Cancer, speaking out about belonging. Okay, we
Mm,
come to Drake and his Cancer
mhm.
moon self, Leo rising, Scorpio stellium, and hello Venus retrograde natal Scorpio, right?
Ooh,
So we just spoke about how Venus retrograde is going to be a wild time for Kendrick.
yeah,
Well, it's going to be a pretty wild time for Drake too.
yeah, yeah. It's like his Venus retrograde in a Mars ruled sign is like rhyming with this Venus retrograde in a Mars ruled sign. Yeah,
Oh, I
things are heating up.
like that. I like
Yeah.
that. I see your Gemini. Okay. And
Yeah.
both of K Dot and Drake both having the Libra Aries nodal axis, both going through their nodal returns, right? So again, about the decision to do better. How are
Mhm.
we reacting to a situation? And this is not
Yes.
the only instance of this. This is history. Okay. So we have to choose better this time.
Yeah.
Um, any, I want to say evolving thoughts on Drake because I know that, we've already proclaimed Kendrick kind of like our winner at this point, because this is not over.
Yeah.
Um, any evolving thoughts on Drake's placements now that we know more of the story, lawsuits and all included?
Well, I mean, and in whole sign houses, he has like a very litigious chart
Hmm.
in terms of like the way that he would remedy like a
Yes.
fight or work with his enemies is through the court of law. And the reason I say that is because his ninth house of like law and courts is ruled by Mars, which is in his
Hmm.
seventh house of other people. So it makes sense that his mode of defense is to take it to the court or take it to some kind of higher order, right, to decide. I looked through your notes and obviously he's dropped some of these lawsuits, so it hasn't been totally fruitful for him.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's also the juxtaposition between Mars retrograde in one's 12th versus one's 10th, where Kendrick Lamar, deservedly so, is getting a lot of accolades. But again,
Hmm.
it's at the expense of Drake when Mars goes through the 12th, like hidden enemies, right? Or like needing to protect, your space in some kind of way. It's like more of a spicier, difficult situation to deal with when Mars
Hmm.
is on your moon and in the 12th house.
Oh gosh.
Uranus exactly on his midheaven right now, so dropping a surprise album. But I also think like dust hasn't settled. Which way is Drake gonna go? We won't know,
Hmm.
maybe until Uranus enters Gemini. So yeah, those are in like juxtaposing like the different transits happening between them. Even though they're the
Hmm.
same transits, they're just triggering different areas of life and different like, sensitivities. So Drake, in my opinion and estimation, is going through it and is kind of having like a chaotic, not okay, not chaotic, but more of a Uranian response. Like it's not organized or thoughtful. Okay, I won't say that, but it's not Saturn with the moon, which is Kendrick Lamar, which is
Yeah.
very
Which is
strategic in some kind of way. Yeah,
I
that's
love
what comes up.
that. I
What
love
about
that.
you?
I love that. I mean, it is interesting because I know he's been trying to make an album with Party for like a long ass time, right? And so
Yeah.
now that this is finally out, it almost makes me wonder if they underestimated the beef going on for so long, even,
Mm,
and they were just kind of trying to like go according to like their rollout plan.
yeah.
But the reality is this new Sexy Songs for You album kind of sucks, right? Like, sorry. The only song that's really like something is, I think, that Pimmy chick. Like, she's incredible. That song is amazing. And Drake, credit to him, will find like these artists randomly. It's also his Cancer moon, like finding this
Yeah.
undiscovered talent like on that level. What they do after, different story, but he, credit to that still, right?
Yeah.
So it is kind of interesting. And we also heard recently Drake had said, the beef is not over at his
Mm,
Melbourne show, Knife Talk with
mm.
21 Savage, which I really like that song. And then now I'm like, oh, okay, well, 21's gonna get dragged into this, I guess. So here we go.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, honestly, what's really striking about all of this too is because I do a lot of pop culture. Blake Lively and Drake are both Leo risings, and you can both kind of see like what is happening. I mean, when literally Mars is going through your 12th house, like you're getting dragged in a very public manner for stuff that you might have been trying to like hide or like keep low, keep hidden.
Yeah.
Boom, no, it's all in full display for you to deal with. Oh, it is painful. It
Yeah.
is so
It
freaking
is.
painful. But
Yeah.
Drake, I like that point that you make about, as my attack, as the Mars in the seventh. with the legal house, right? Like I'm going to attack you with a lawsuit basically as my mode of defense. But something that I love about the
Yeah.
seventh house too is it's not a guarantee that that energy belongs to you. You might have that
Mhm.
placement, sure, but you might not actually embody it. Everyone else might embody that for you instead of you, right?
Right.
So when I think about a Mars in Aquarius, literally the people against Drake
Wow. That is so true.
is so
Yeah.
loud. And it's like, oh gosh, okay, you can see where if you don't actually claim, right? If you don't claim what it's asking you, and in this case, ninth house, truth, again, doubling down, like really lean into, like, get honest with your feelings. None of this moody stuff that is not consequential, right? Like, that's what he just tried to do with sexy songs for you or sounds or whatever. And it's falling flat. Everyone's like, no, we want something real because Kendrick has shown us you can get real and you can get cheeky and you can get hateful. You can do it all. You don't have to just do one thing.
Right.
Multitudes.
Absolutely. And now it's making me see like Uranus on the midheaven as like, this is my grand distraction. I did an album. Like, look here. Don't look in this other direction that I don't want you to look in.
Don't
But
you?
yeah, planets in the seventh house is what we consciously or not like give away to other people. And Pluto is there right now. I can't help but notice this, the same themes happening with Donald Trump in terms of Regulus rising,
Mhm.
enemies, Mars in the 12th house getting sued left and right. Like your goodwill is diminishing in the eyes of the people.
Mhm.
And what does Uranus in the midheaven do? Like, oh, anything. Like, let me do a little this, a little bit of that. Let me say it's not over, even though I don't have a plan.
Panic.
You're right, panic in some kind of way. And we see that. We can definitely see that. It also reminds me of like the sideways movements of the crab. Like, what if I go over
Mhm.
here? What if I go over here? It's just like not direct in the way that
Mhm.
Kendrick Lamar was. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
It, you know what just came through, that line from Not Like Us where it's like you need to basically go to Atlanta when you
yeah,
need a dollar. I think about the Mars in Aquarius, right? It's very pillaging energy too, like colonizer energy, right? Like let
totally.
me go take from other people because I don't have this for myself. Same with the Party album. Let me ride this out, bringing someone in. Let me do this with someone else. Like I'm not standing alone. I know, Kendrick has Mustard. I know he has his team and everything too. But again, this is a collab album with Party Next Door. It is not a Drake standalone album, right? So
God,
let me use this resource to help bolster my offense, defense, whatever we want to call it.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And speaking about another thing that just came to mind, Mars and Aquarius, like again, if I saw this in someone's chart, I would be like, please cultivate at the expense of everything, some kind of individuality, my friend. Like,
Ooh.
please move to the authentic rhythms of your soul.
Mm.
And Leo rising, that's hard because you do want to pander, right? You want the applause, you
Mm-hmm.
want the validation. So it makes me think like, oh, in a lot of ways, Drake has given away Mars seventh house his authenticity. Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
We like Kendrick Lamar because we understand who he is, what he stands for. But like, we don't maybe get that from Drake. We just get reactions and artifice and like, this is my performance. But like, who are you really? Like,
Mm.
yeah, I don't know.
I
That's what comes to mind.
Oh, for sure. I mean, hello, fourth house Scorpio stellium. We're never gonna know the real Drake.
We're
Like
never gonna
I
know. I don't think he knows.
there we go. And like here's the thing, right? Like whenever people comment about celebrity stuff, it's always very interesting because I'm then looking at the charts to think, what are people's reactions actually trying to teach you about you? Because on some level,
Mm,
everything is an inherent reflection of our inner world, right? And so we all kind of we're all the Mars and Aquarius in his chart right now, right? Kind of trying to reflect back at him. Hey, speak your actual truth, Saturn and Sag, but that Mars in Aquarius does square, okay, his Scorpio sun, his
does.
Pluto in Scorpio, right? Like, so there is a natural tension between wanting to belong, wanting to assimilate with the crowd, yet still rule, right? So it's like a very weird
Absolutely.
dynamic, but let me like not reveal myself. Let me also hide children while I'm at
Yeah,
it, right? Like fourth house again.
absolutely. And like that Mars square to Pluto, like just keeping things so close to the chest is one of the things that's probably working against him. Like
Mm-hmm.
just be out there.
Oh God. I mean, like, this is the worst Pluto square ever. I mean, no, it's
It's
not the
difficult.
worst. It is pretty difficult, right? Like him again, Blake they're both going through their Pluto squares, and it's gnarly to
Yes,
watch because you're like,
it
oh
is.
God, Pluto is really showing itself via the audience,
And
via
it's
the fans.
angular. It's loud, right? Kendrick Lamar is
It's
going through the same thing, but it's between what his second house and his fifth house. It's a little
mhm.
bit, and I won't say hidden, but I feel like it's not as much in a difficult place as it is for Drake and Blake. Did you know that?
The Jupiter in Gemini is Geminiing, let
Oh
me
my
tell
God.
you.
Twinning, Jake
Yes.
Blake. Oh my
Yes.
God.
It's
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to do pop culture and astrology right now because it's overstimulating. I mean, it's a lot to do anything
Yeah.
else right now. So God
It's
bless you
so
if you're still
much.
here with us. But what I was gonna say is obviously if we think about this being a moment where Drake is being asked to evolve, right? All that Scorpio in the fourth house, evolve or die,
Yes.
basically. He's
Yeah.
saying he's not dead. So I'm waiting for an evolution to come through. Now, again, we said this is a Venus retrograde that'll be interesting. Venus will officially station on March 1st
Mm.
through April 12th. And this is going to draw a lot of resemblance to the timeline from last year,
Okay.
because I feel like that it's like another eclipse situation. Like this battle is wild because it definitely traces to the Aries Libra eclipse cycles of it
Yeah.
all. It kind of goes back all the way to like 2011. So again, if you're
Mm.
just coming in now and you're like, what happened? It's like, well, there's a whole Neptune and Pisces that
Yeah. How much
happened
time do you
between
have?
them. Literally, literally. One last thing I want to say about Drake's chart, and of course, any additional comments for you is obviously that Chiron in Aries on his nodal axis. Like, ouch,
Ouch.
right?
Big ouchie. Yeah.
Big, and literally, this is a chart of I'm in pain right now. And
Mhm.
here's the thing, if this were a chart of someone that like was more self-actualized, was maybe like kind of more aligned with what they're doing, this is a phenomenal moment for them. This is a moment they're coming into their own, crushing it.
Healing. Yeah. You can totally spin this in a healing, cathartic direction or
Mm-hmm.
not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And right now, it's like Chiron and Aries, right? So much about Me Too, and also obviously a big feature in the Me Too movement back in 2017, 2018, but so much about identity wounding, right? Like I
Hmm.
matter too. And admittedly, this is something I did want to bring up just now when you were talking about the Mars and Cancer and uniting the othered communities. Let's
Hmm.
just put it that way, right?
Yeah.
Basically, if you think about Drake, right? Drake as and this is nothing to do with, him being half black and half Jewish, but just the idea that he's like a Canadian rapper, right? And he's coming in like Cancer is so patriotic and it's so country. So again, you're having this identity thing. Like, what do you represent if you are the person representing hip hop? Like that's
Yeah.
not really what this is about.
Yeah.
I'm trying to really do something here, right? And like actually get to the heart of what this is. And so
Absolutely.
it's another interesting layer to it. And with the Chiron and Aries, like Drake, yeah, where does he belong? What how can he actually use his identity for good, for greater
Right.
truth?
Right. And that Venus retrograde through the ninth and kind of in the eighth, Venus retrograde is always about like what are your values? Like what is
Mm-hmm.
actually fundamentally important to you? Because that is the foundation upon which a really strong selfhood and self-understanding is built. So
Mm-hmm.
there's maybe, right, that kind of consideration of like what do I stand for? What's important to me? What are my values? What matters that Drake may be going through like internally
Mm-hmm.
during this retrograde process. And it can,
Mm-hmm.
of course, be a period of confusion where you get no clarity, but it can, if you take it seriously, right, and you're doing your inner work, it can certainly be fortifying for like, all right, this is what matters. This is how I'm moving forward. And that really clears up self-wounding, I think, in
Mm-hmm.
some kind of way, or it assists it. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what, with Drake's chart, he can't do it alone, right? He's going to always
No.
need someone to reflect that back to him because he's
Yeah.
never going to figure it out on his own. His
Yeah.
Cancer moon, Scorpio, all that Scorpio, too difficult. He will never be able to see your perspective through his tears. Like that's just never going to
Oh my
happen,
God, like the
right?
subjectivity, right? And that
Yes.
Mars in Aquarius is like this brute force of like, this is what's actually happening.
Oh my
This is
God.
the logic, the objection, not object, the objective, right? Kind of step back that
Yes.
is so hard for Cancer and Scorpio energy. So,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. You need it though. We need it though. We need it though. Someone deeply both Cancer
Please.
and Scorpionic. I
Yeah.
desperately need it. But what, what I was actually kind of interested in too potentially is, talking about the timeline between the
Yep.
both of them. Admittedly, we are in a very interesting time, but I did only want to bring up the timeline in Max, I guess, history format because this is something I think really interesting, especially with your research in Neptune in Pisces, and
Mm,
its connection to the Black experience. And also when you think about the hip hop chart,
yeah.
which, you know what, actually, maybe I'll pull that up in a second. But
Yeah.
you know what? Yeah, let me pull up the hip hop chart. I think one of the most like striking things, the fact that we have a hip hop chart with an actual time, so that not
Yeah.
only can you see, what's happening in these individual players' chart, but because they are representatives of wider, like a bigger thing, you now have this context additionally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, like it's playing into the legacy of hip hop, or like these are two actors, right, that are playing into like this entire hip hop journey, which is at a very critical moment with the pileup of planets in its first house. And I
Mm-hmm.
like what you said, right? So just mirroring what you said before we jumped on, like hip hop is going through an identity crisis in some kind of way, right? Through this proxy war between Kendrick and Drake. And so after Saturn is done, after Neptune is done with this space, like what will hip hop be for now? Will it be like the performative, like I have money, I have houses, I have bitches type shit? Or are we
Mm-hmm.
gonna like move in this more Kendrick Lamar direction, which is like what message do we actually want to convey here that can be important and profound for the people who are listening? And don't get me wrong, I
Mm.
think there is a place for fun. Like pop music is fun. Like we need those kind of like bangers.
Mm-hmm.
But hip hop overwhelmingly, I think, you know, historically has been maybe more materialistic or like dog eat dog in that kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And that Pisces rising and all this change in the first house is like maybe peeling back that identity to see if there's going to be more depth moving forward with this
Yes.
field. What are we going to talk about? Who are we going to let in? What's important? What are we going to elevate? What will we de-escalate? Right? All of these things are kind of coming through.
I love that. I mean, I also love
Um,
that we're recording this on Pisces, like the day of Pisces season. It's like front and
yeah,
center
the
hip hop
ingress.
chart.
Yes.
Yep, yep. Yeah, it is very interesting, because we were also just talking about Chiron, right? And obviously, hip hop chart is going through its
See that?
Chiron return, which
Yes.
is so much about where do we go from here, identity wise, in the second house of my voice.
Very good. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. And the Aries is like, what are we going to project? What will we assert? Right? What is the clear message, right, that we're trying to get through now? We don't know yet.
Yes. We don't know yet, but I do find it very interesting. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of Aries activation this spring, as we mentioned in both
Yeah.
Kendrick's chart in his seventh house, right, of fans of relationships, of one-on-one rap battles. But then in Drake's chart, it's gonna be again in his ninth house. So like all this legal stuff playing out. But in the hip hop chart, it's the second house,
Yeah.
resources, confidence, it's day to day, it's work too on some level, but it's stability, right? This is shaking up a long standing kind of narrative. Um, but I couldn't help but think Mars and Aries, that's so much about it feels very like rap battle, right? It feels like
Of
beef. It
course.
feels, you have to kind of go there.
Yeah.
So on some level, okay, I was gonna play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Is is Kendrick actually doing what is set out to be done with Mars and Aries, Chiron and Aries, the wounding around beef in hip hop as a fundamental legacy narrative around hip hop as well. And admittedly, right, recently you've heard, I think like Young Thug or like there's some rappers coming on being like they're trying to like squat or like get them to get along, right? Like basically
Yeah.
everyone's like, okay, like let's all get along now on some
Right.
level.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I'm curious. I'm not saying one is the right path or the other, because I'm definitely enjoying this spiritual like teardown, but I can't help but wonder with the Mars and Chiron and Aries.
Yeah, like is Kendrick Lamar's Jupiter and Aries coming by to just inflame that wounding? And you're so
Mm-hmm.
right. I've kind of heard that sentiment. Like I went to go get like a shape up the other day, and my barber
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Wouldn't it have been so cool if Kendrick Lamar brought Drake out and it was like this huge healing moment in front of everybody?" And the hater side of me was
Mm.
like, no. But the more evolved side of me, or I won't even say it in that kind of binary way, but another side of me was like, wow, that would have been incredible catharsis. I wonder what like that would have looked like, what that would have done, like if people would have been angry or if it would have been a
Mhm.
catalyst for healing. So you're
Mhm.
right in that, you know, Kendrick Lamar is carrying on like the beef, right? He is carrying on like the pain and the jabs and like again like this Chiron
Mhm.
and Aries, like I'm gonna take shots at your identity type thing. But
Yeah.
again, Aries is about choosing your battles, which means implicitly there
Mm.
is a fight to be had. Like, there is a fight. And so, yeah, I think it's one of those things like, well, time will tell if this was a wounding or if this was a catalyst for maybe healing in a different conversation in hip hop. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I can't help but think
Mhm.
about the one line that here's the thing, Kendrick is so brilliant, right? Because I think he's already kind of addressed a little bit of this in GNX, specifically like in Reincarnated. Like there is one line where he goes, I'm trying to push peace, but you love war. How can you forgive if there's no
Mhm.
forgiveness in your heart, right? And so to me that really it's like wow, and he talks about his ego, and Lucifer is kind of like, well, you have an ego too, and so there's like a big confrontation around like what have you done or what are you doing, and really like where are we really at with this. So
Oh
um
my God. Yeah. That's
yeah,
incredible because, this is just speculation, but what if Kendrick Lamar took so long to release his diss track because he was literally battling with like, should I even do this?
totally,
Libra
totally,
rising, South Node in Libra,
totally.
like a legacy of peace. And if we're talking about planets in the seventh house is what we give away to others, like that Jupiter in
Mm-hmm.
Aries in his seventh house is hungry for conflict. So
Mm-hmm.
did he give in to that and just perform really well and create this beautiful song that now has its own like culture and meaning?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
again, is it something that he went into with like, oh, should I actually do this? Like, you guys love war, but I'm kind of a peaceful, spiritual dude. Like, yeah, it's so
Mm-hmm.
interesting. I would love to sit down and talk to him about like, did you want to proactively chase this beef, or did you feel pressured into doing it because of the culture of beef in hip hop?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
Questions we
mean,
might never know the answer to. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I can't help but like, if I'm just gonna pull like Kendrick's chart just really quick, that Chiron on the sun, right, in between Venus, like in a way there is like I don't know, there's something around like the narrative and then healing the narrative, right? Venus and Gemini there. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know again. And it's also, and think about all his Gemini getting activated by Uranus and Gemini coming up, right? So like that
Mm,
dipping a toe this summer with Jupiter and Cancer, like this is it feels like the way that the universe is rewarding Kendrick, like there is this like aha moment around, yes, you're doing kind of what you're doing. But I don't know. I don't know. It's always just very
yeah.
interesting to think about. And admittedly, right? Like now I think it's interesting, going back to the timeline. If you think about when they first came onto the scene, when Kendrick first came to the scene, that was like back in 2011. Okay. That
Okay.
was like literally again, Neptune first moving into Pisces. Okay. If you think
Mm,
about the symbolism in the hip hop chart, like a new spiritual person like arising onto the scene, right? Like it sets the
ooh, yeah.
scene really, really well. Or a spiritual messenger. But it's the idea that Drake actually helped Kendrick get poppin' at
Okay.
first. Because Drake
Okay.
brought
Tell me more
Kendrick.
about that. Okay.
Yeah, Drake actually brought Kendrick on tour. I mean, here's the thing, right? We go back to Drake's
Mm.
chart, Mars and Aquarius. Who's really helping who here? Okay, because Drake does like to find those untapped talent, right? Like you got the weekend. But again, how Drake chooses to then treat you after he finds you is a totally different scorpionic story. And
Yeah.
so one might assume that something, one can maybe speculate, right? Like, okay, maybe there's like the seeds of something like this where Drake finds a young rapper and it's like, okay, great, I'm going to bring him onto tour with me, and like this is going to be great, it's going to help boost his career. But what I found interesting about that time is Venus actually was also had moved into Aries literally that Feb 2012 when Kendrick joined Drake on tour. And it
Wow.
was also Mercury conjunct Neptune in Pisces. That was Feb 14th of 2012. The Sun conjunct Neptune in Pisces, Feb 19th. And there was a Mars retrograde.
Oh my God. So
It,
they karmically, they're just the story is so thick here. And were you thinking, like, Drake brings people on, I don't know, for whatever benefit, even if it's an emotional benefit, but once they
Mhm.
become not useful for him, or once Kendrick
Bigger
Lamar maybe
eclipse.
an eclipsed, I was gonna use that exact word, once he eclipsed him, it's like,
Mhm.
oh, how dare you? Like, now the pettiness comes out, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna, use subliminal messages to, attack you through my lyrics, like all of that. That's really
Yeah.
interesting because he does
Yeah.
have a pattern rather of like taking people up and using them and then discarding them.
Mhm.
About
Absolutely.
Drake does, which yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So
Yes.
and
It's
Kendrick Lamar was like, "You tried to throw me away, but you didn't know I was a seed."
Oh my gosh. I mean, here's the thing. After that tour, okay, like they collaborated on Poetic Justice, which is a
Yes,
great song. Okay, great, great song. And they also worked on Fucking Problems with ASAP,
yes,
right? So great song also in a different way.
yeah,
Um, and then this was the moment. This is the moment that a lot of people are going to reference. Control came out
yeah.
in August of 2013. Leo
Mm,
season, right? So for the hip hop chart, very pertinent, okay? Mercury and Sun. And at the
yes.
time in Control, which you can again only find on YouTube, and I highly recommend listening to it if you haven't, basically Kendrick goes off in his Jupiter and Aries way. Let me proclaim I'm here to murder all of y'all. And he like lists every rapper possible at that time, Drake, Meek Miller, Andre 3000, like everyone.
Was
Okay.
this unprovoked?
Literally, yes. It was just him,
Okay.
like he was just coming out and peacocking. Like, I'm here to murder y'all, trying to make sure your core friends never heard of y'all. Like, it's very, very Aries, very,
Yeah,
very Aries. Okay.
yeah.
And at the same time, Control came out. Okay. Not on any album. Big Sean, poor guy. Um, Drake is also releasing Hold On, We're Going Home. Like, that
Mhm.
came out at that same time, roughly around the same time. And so Drake initially was upset because it's like, why did he come out and say this? He's like effing with my album rollout and all this stuff. Okay. Because Drake is only the only person that is like upset about this whole thing right now.
Okay,
Like, of
yeah.
all the rappers listed, it is only Drake that is butthurt about this, right? In Cancer Moon fashion. And admittedly, though, he then says, like, yeah, like, I think he's actually like a lyrical genius. Like, he actually calls Kendrick a genius. He actually gives him his flowers. Like, and I think is trying to be nice and play nice. But again, with all that Scorpio in the fourth house, you don't really know what's happening behind the scenes. And if Kendrick is like hashing it out, or, and Drake is trying to keep it underground, like that could be very much a thing as well. That could be
Yeah.
very much a thing as well.
It feels like I don't know if it was unprovoked, just like from what we can consume from the public eye, but we don't know like what went on behind the scenes. And again,
Mm-hmm.
I think I talked about this in our prior episode, like that Venus in Scorpio can be tricky with respect to
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to publicly manipulate the narrative here.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm going to do
Mm-hmm.
deceptive kind of fourth house Scorpio retrograde kind of things in order to curry favor or to uphold my value, right? I don't know. So you're right
Yeah.
that was a nice compliment, but like, what was the strategy behind it? There's always a strategy with Scorpio. Like, what is the long-term maneuvering that you're doing here?
Literally, I'm like, honestly, the moment, and this is no shade to Scorpios, okay? Like, I have Scorpio clients. I
Absolutely
love my
not.
Scorpio clients. I'm a Scorpio rising with Pluto on my ascendant, okay? Like, I
Mhm.
have had choice words at me, and so I can empathize very deeply with the Scorpio experience. But if knowing what I know of Drake and then seeing what I see in the chart, it's like, hmm, that's really
Mhm.
interesting. Like, I'm not really sure what to believe that you're like whatever you're putting out. Like, it's hard for me to buy it.
Absolutely.
But what's worth noting is like after that Control, first decla bold proclamation, I should say, Kendrick's bold proclamation, they kind of spend a few years going back and forth like lightly at each other. Nothing too crazy, nothing like the beef we see now. But
Like
it's
a
worth
Cold War. Yeah.
Kind of. It's like one little jab here, another small jab there, no consequential blows. But between this sort of 2013, to 2016, really, okay, when all this is happening, the nodes were also in Aries and Libra. Okay, there were other
But
nodes happening
flipped?
too.
Okay, yeah.
So, we have this moment, right? Like the feud's continuing, the nodes are still doing their thing. It's still part of this, Aries Libra nodal axis situation. And funnily enough, Obama gets involved, calling Kendrick his favorite rapper and Drake an outstanding entertainer,
Oh
echoing
my God, like
exactly.
North Node in Libra during that time, first of all, let's keep the peace, or let's
Mm-hmm.
put it through the art.
Mm-hmm.
Having like the highest diplomat in the world give like a very diplomatic response. Right? It's like very Libra and like the flip so script, flip
Mm-hmm.
script, the script flipped. Sorry, Gemini tongue-tied. When the North Node shifted to Aries, it's like there's a
Mm-hmm.
diminishing of that Libra now. Like no diplomacy. We're just gonna
Mm-hmm.
go after, right? And like, yeah, yeah, that's incredible.
Maybe if
Like
you
the
think about it,
synchronicity.
right? Like maybe if you think about it, right? Like the nodes are acting in such, okay, there's a time for war and there's a time for diplomacy. That was a
Yep,
time for diplomacy. That was a time we could have actually mended this. Like it didn't have to get to this point, right? On some
true.
level. So also interesting in the context of keeping the beef going when does this really need to happen? I mean, now we get a really amazing moment out of it, but it does not change
Yeah,
the underlying question. Um,
absolutely.
what is interesting is, we don't really hear anything after that point, okay? Until, and maybe I'm mistaken. There are other journalists out there, people of the internet. Please let me know in the comments if I'm missing anything. But what I found really interesting is the Venus retrograde of summer 2023. That was a Venus retrograde in Leo, a very loud one at that. And it happened to coincide with Drake's last tour.
Hmm.
It's all a blur with 21 Savage. Again, 21 Savage is this like he used knife talk to proclaim the beef is not over as we're about to head into this Venus retrograde. So I think it's an interesting parallel there. But during the summer, he was actually touring, like, I think in LA, and maybe this was in August too, but during that time, he was very much in LA. He was, I think, at
Hmm.
Crypto Arena. He brought LeBron out on stage. It basically was like LA welcome him home.
Yeah.
And so now you fast forward to eclipse season of 2023 when the nodes officially moved into Libra and Aries.
Hmm.
And October 2023 October 24th, 2023 specifically, was when first person shooter drops. First person shooter, you know, J. Cole and Drake. J.
Yeah.
Cole was again to me the winner of this beef because he stepped out
Peaced out.
very early on after
Yeah.
dropping, I thought, a great 7 minute drill song. But nevertheless, first person shooter came out during eclipse season. I
Um,
I mean, like
yeah. Yeah.
no words, honestly. Um,
Not only that it's a beef track, but that it's called first person shooter.
yep.
It's so Aries, like my solo dolo lone wolf attack to get you.
Yes. Yes. I think what is it? Love when they argue the hardest MC. Is it K Dot? Is it Aubrey? Or me? We the big three, like we started a league, is what co-rap. Like I mean, that's cute. And like it honestly echoes control, right? Like and they again, Kendrick started that.
Hmm.
Okay. And we're just referencing. But there was a quiet period because then come eclipse season again in the spring, that was when we got connected on this, when
Yes.
everything was getting dropped. Like that came out. That was March 22nd, 2024, right in like the thick of eclipse season,
Yeah.
Mercury retrograde. Again, it's like very much picking up on the same vibe that we're about to walk into again.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But this Venus retrograde. Yeah.
With Venus retrograde, with Mercury retrograde again,
Yeah.
okay, like this is never it really feels like it's never ending, but we
I was gonna say,
are
like, do you think this is the definitive last chapter, or does it look
no.
like okay?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my humble little prediction is this is gonna happen all the way through Mars retrograde in Virgo. Like this is
Ooh,
gonna be a cycle through the nodal switch into Pisces
oh,
and Virgo.
you're right.
And
Yeah.
because and going back to that piece of information I found in Feb 2012, Mars was retrograde in Virgo at the time. So this would really be a full-blown Mars cycle closing out. But we're gonna definitely see, like, I think the bulk of activity kind of hit another turning point this spring.
Yeah, and like Mars, Virgo, what is Kendrick's 12th house? What happens when the tables turn and Mars is doing that same dance to your 12th house instead of Drake's 12th house? Hmm?
Yes, that is going
What's
to
gonna
be
happen?
very spicy. And here's the thing, as a Pisces moon, this Mars retrograde in Virgo.
Yeah, ouchie. The same ouchie that Drake got with Mars retrograde on his Cancer moon right now.
Yeah. So
Drake, I hope you
again,
have some cosmic protection.
you get
Some
all those
powers.
obsidian blades, Drake,
Yes.
like put them
And
on your
Kendrick, like
altar.
both of y'all.
And
Yes.
yes, it's actually kind of interesting. Again, on the one hand, I can see like awesomeness happening for a lot of awesomeness happening for Kendrick, right? In like the shorter term, but then longer term, it's like, oh, that's an interesting dynamic we've got going on. That's
Yeah. The
here.
story is not over yet. Yeah, and
No,
he's just the victor maybe of this chapter.
yes. And you know what?
Yeah.
Maybe you and I will like reconvene for like the part three of that, which, next next year, next eclipse
Yeah,
cycle,
Drake
right?
ascendance into American popularity. Yeah, with the most
Reemergence.
yeah, something like that.
Well, because you know what? We all love a good Scorpio rising from the ashes story. Okay. Like, as much
Oh
as
yeah.
I like a good hater moment, like beat you down, after you get beaten down, I would like you to rise back up again and like show us what you're about. Okay. Own your shit and show us what you're about.
Yeah, and we don't like the dynamic that's different between Aries and Scorpio, both of these Mars ruled signs is that, Aries is like I'm on the front lines, I'm attacking like very loud, just like running into it. Scorpio is like guerrilla warfare, right? We're talking
Mm,
long-term strategy. And he has his Mercury there, Sun there, Pluto, Venus. We have no idea what plans Drake is brimming up right now. He's
mm-hmm,
maybe the long-term warrior where it looks like, Kendrick Lamar is like winning, right, with this punchy Aries energy. But
mm-hmm.
Drake may come back and be like, actually, you didn't plan for this.
Yeah, no, I'm actually a little terrified of like what Drake will have. Like, because you cannot count a Scorpio out, much less a Scorpio stellium out. Speaking of Scorpio stelliums, I mean, Ryan Reynolds, hello, Scorpio
Yeah.
stellium. Justin Baldoni, hello, Scorpio stellium, right? Like, this is the type of energy where it's like there's a lot of maneuvering behind the scenes. And admittedly, this is. This is interesting. I wasn't necessarily anticipating talking about this, but here we are, Mercury and Pisceing it up.
Yeah.
You had brought up the lawsuits with Drake,
Yeah.
right? Like that was his form of retaliation. But admittedly, okay, he dropped some, but he then immediately filed a federal suit on Jan 15th against UMG. So he initially pulled his first one because it was like half-assed. It was the Blake Lively CRD complaint, basically, for discovery. And then now it's like a real federal suit against UMG. And it came out, and I thought it was interesting because it obviously came out on the Mars opposition.
Mhm.
And if there's one thing that
Mars opt to
this
Pluto.
Mars Sun as part of this
Mars sun.
retrograde. Hmm.
Got it.
Yes, Mars Sun, that happened. That was filed Jan 15th. So that was like the halfway point of this Mars retrograde, essentially.
Mhm.
And so I thought it was interesting that the turning point of the retrograde is we formalized the lawsuit. We doubled down. We went federal with this. Now, it is
Yeah.
worth noting that as much as yes, we can all agree that Drake's being a little baby about stuff, okay? Like
Mhm.
fight your battles, not fight it with a lawsuit.
Mhm.
I think we can also maybe hold space for the idea that there are a lot of legitimacy to claims, not necessarily just about not like us, but the idea of payola, the idea of how the music industry decides to use its pay and play method, how your algorithm gets hacked basically by the music industry experts, right? Like there's a lot of behind the scenes power plays that Drake is also actually exposing by virtue of like him being the vessel for it, right? Like regardless if we think it's
Yeah.
legitimate or not, he's actually trying to well, not intentionally expose because he understands how the game is played.
Yeah.
Because he's doing this because he understands it, which means that shouldn't we like be looking into that also more seriously? Like, who is dictating our choices? Who is dictating what we listen to, right? And
Yeah.
again, separate from this not like us battle, like taking this out of the battle period as an issue.
That's very true. Like, there's a lot of manipulation that happens behind the scenes, but I'm not sure that Drake hasn't benefited from it. He
Oh,
just
no.
hasn't benefited from it this time, which is
Mhm.
why I think this lawsuit is emotional and ridiculous in a lot of ways. To be the
Yes.
most played, to be the top, is to constantly have a machine behind you, pumping you to the top. Drake has
Mhm.
benefited from that in massive ways. So to sue the
Mhm.
system that you benefited off of, again,
Mhm.
it lacks a certain kind of integrity or self-awareness. Like the moment
Mhm.
it doesn't benefit you, you're just going to get litigious. Okay.
Yes. And now we can, here's the thing, now it's out in the open. We can have a whole conversation, right? About like, do we want
Yeah.
a more fair music system? Like, how does that look? Artist royalties, who gets paid? How does this happen? Right? Like, it's a big systemic thing. It,
It is, and it's like two male rappers, and I can't help but be like, what about the women? Like
hmm.
they're just so subordinate to all this. Like that needs to be a real conversation here. Like not just two power players, fighting each other for like who's gonna have the most
Oh my
plays or
God.
the power or most influence between two men. Like if you want to get serious, let's talk about the real injustices, yeah,
Oh,
that are in hip
absolutely.
hop.
Absolutely. I mean, here's the thing. Obviously, Doechii had a phenomenal moment at the Grammys, and Doechii
Yes.
is has been, okay? She's not just currently. Like she has been doing it and she's now getting all her shine, which is much respect, much like she's so fucking
Finally.
talented. Um and it is interesting because Dochi's what? She's a Leo sun. I don't have a chart up, but I know she's a Leo sun. I know she's a Mars in Cancer. So a big moment for Mars Cancer retrograde, like reclaiming. So it's not all bad, Mars in Cancer, okay? But something that really struck me from our last conversation too, because here's the thing. I love that in the two separate conversations we've had about Drake and Kendrick, we always end up talking about the woman.
Mhm.
And
'Cause they're the losers of the beef. I'll tell you that much.
and the thing is, last time you brought up a really, really beautiful point about the hip hop chart and sort of, I think, the way that the female rapper or artist is treated. You
Mhm.
highlighted Venus in this chart.
Women as utility, women as what can we kind of like use them for in order to prop ourselves up. Venus is very uncomfortable in Virgo. She feels like she has to fight for her value, fight to matter, fight for her love. So yeah, I think it mirrors the way that women show up in the hip hop industry, how they have to fight twice as hard, how they're subjugated, how they're props in a lot of ways. That's if we can have a Me Too moment for the hip hop industry, which I do believe is coming in
Mm.
some capacity, it is coming. That is the conversation that I think will really light my heart on fire. Not like two very powerful men going at it. Like I love Kendrick Lamar, like don't get me started. Like
Hmm.
he's great, but at the end of the day,
Hmm.
if we're looking systemically, you guys
Yeah.
are two men who are at the top of your game who have benefited from patriarchy. Sorry.
I mean, yes, snaps to that. I think we kind of are gonna see it come through a little bit, Venus retrograde in Aries. But Chiron on that Mars in Aries is also very interesting to me. But
Yeah.
when you think about Pluto opposing Mercury, right? Like and the idea again that hip hop is in a very transformative time right now. Um, and the idea of also Doechii being a Leo and a very, very strong voice right now getting highlighted, I feel like by that Pluto and Mercury opposition. Like we are shifting the
Yeah.
voice of hip hop. We are shifting it to more than just pop ish or something that's catering without any actual nutritional substance, right? Something this is admittedly one line that Drake said a long time ago that I think is also very worth noting in this context. This was back during that Venus retrograde in Leo in July of 2015 when they were still doing this beef back and forth. Drake had said, I would have all of your fans if I didn't go pop and I stayed on some conscious shit.
Mm. Okay.
And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, maybe you should stay on conscious shit, friend. Like,
Yeah.
because we've all turned
Like
against you.
yeah,
I'm
right.
just
To have
kidding.
that awareness and then be like, yeah, I guess I'm not gonna do that. And he says, he says that in a way that's patronizing. Like, oh, Kendrick opened his mouth, go give him a Grammy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's such hateration. I mean, it's so like, oh my God, he's conscious. Like, does that make him a subordinate artist? Because there have been ways that I guess conscious rappers have been put in like a different kind of category versus like mainstream
Mm-hmm.
rappers. And so I felt
Mm-hmm.
like there was a tone there that I didn't appreciate. And Saturn in Pisces doesn't appreciate that either. It's the
Yeah.
in the sign of consciousness. Like, what are you gonna do to run like that's why Saturn is protecting Kendrick Lamar for now.
Yes, yes. How
It will enter his
conscious.
seventh house. Good luck.
T's and P's to that. I mean, yeah, when I think about a Jupiter and Pisces in the eighth, right, I think about the idea of let me just stay in a bubble. Let me not like get real about stuff. And now Jupiter is literally squaring that Jupiter. And it's like, oh, we got to expand. We got to expand this perspective and this
Yeah,
bubble so it's more inclusive rather than just
absolutely.
me and my own little
And
Toronto
he's being
bubble.
pulled in that direction by Jupiter in the 11th. That's the people, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is something that is the audiences are engaged in a lot of ways in his own spiritual journey. Now we, of course, are not privy to what's going on behind his scenes, but it's definitely this moment
Never.
of discomfort for
Never.
him. Yeah.
I just like pushed the chart up a little bit just to see like where we end up after this Venus retrograde ends. And look at that. Would you
Yeah.
look at that Jupiter right on his Chiron and Mars like just moving back into Leo, right? Like, I mean, any
Yeah.
initial thoughts on like how this is gonna go for Drake or just, any intuitive hits, right?
I don't think it's going to go poorly for him. I think
Mm-hmm.
that Jupiter in the 11th house is manifesting as like general goodwill. Like he has people
Mm-hmm.
showing up to his concerts, he's making money, he's fine.
In Australia.
When
I'm just kidding.
Mars in the first house is what troubles me because it's the opposition. It's
Mm-hmm.
against transit Pluto as well. So it
Mm-hmm.
brings to mind like tremendous power struggle,
Mm-hmm.
while at the same time Jupiter in the 11th house is like fighting for relevancy or fighting again to like sway the masses with some kind of narrative or again Gemini lyric and something like that. So it's
Mm.
testy, and I think if he uses his power well, it can go positively, but I think we've seen him use his power not so well, and I think that's where it can go disastrously, and then Jupiter
Mm.
just expands upon the results of whatever that destruction is.
That's
That's
fair.
my take here.
Yeah. Oh, spicy.
Yeah.
I like that. I
It's not
like
good or
that.
bad. It's up to the
I like that.
person.
Yeah, no, no, no. We astrology the same way. Whenever
Yeah.
someone's like, "What's your prediction?" I'm like, "Listen, listen. If I give you a prediction, that means I don't have any hope for you, right? And that means I'm assuming you're going on this bottom line. You know what I mean, though? Because predictions are based
That's
on your
hilarious.
choices. So if you are gonna ask me for a prediction, I will take your bottom line, i.e., the least evolved thing you can do for yourself at this moment in time, and base my prediction off that, which usually does not sound very good. Okay, like
No.
let's call a spade a spade. And so I think it's also very interesting that Venus and the North nodes coming together in Pisces, Saturn, Venus. We just talked about all this spiritual protection, right, in the eighth house. Like, I think Drake will definitely come out with more music. And I think it'll be separate from sexy sounds for you, like different completely vibe, like actually more.
If he came out with like a real soulful down, like real feelings, not like I miss my bed and my mom feelings, like
Yeah, yeah,
ouch, this
yeah.
hurt, like this, I would be all for it. Like finally some authenticity.
If you literally
But
gave
that's
me a man in
Scorpio
the
energy.
mirror. Yes, give me a
Yes.
man in the mirror moment. Okay, you're looking at the man in the mirror. You want to sample Tupac, you want to sample everyone, but like have your own man in the mirror moment,
There
which
you go. Be yourself.
again, reincarnated is amazing because of the fact that it samples Tupac and then the idea that Drake's AI Tupac and tailor-made freestyle got taken down is like also another Gemini layer, right?
It
Like just
is.
layers on layers on
And
layers.
like, how many indications do you need from the universe to just show up as you? Please, just be authentic in any way. Even
That
if
is
it's like a learning curve and like it's not fully formed yet, but please, you're not getting any headway with
mm-hmm.
all of this like fake, dumb, performative, like I have Tupac's ring bullshit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
please.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like understand the essence. Like don't just like skirt off the top, which,
There you go.
which is interesting, right? If you think about the whole Neptune experience, which again is work that you've been doing a whole lot on the Black experience, the idea of even like cultural appropriation, right? Neptune is
Hmm.
so porous that way. But it
Yeah,
is striking that nevertheless, this rap battle emerged or it has its early footings in that Neptune Pisces ingress back in 2011. And now that we're
that's
concluding it, I mean, do you have any, I guess, any like initial intuitive hits on like, wow, like what this beef might have meant for hip hop itself or, like, or just any like thoughts really around it? I love to hear you speak always.
Yeah, when I think of Neptune and Pisces, I think of the image, the zeitgeist. What is the costume I need to put on? What can I do to glamorize people, hypnotize them, get them to look in my direction? And Pisces is very susceptible to that, which is why Neptune in Pisces is deeply potent and why modern astrologers assign Neptune as the ruler of Pisces. And so I think in like Drake's way, like one of the new things I'm going to add to my Neptune research is Neptune does have a lot to do with like passing,
Mm,
obviously in like in a racial visual way, but also in like I'm just going to kind of skirt the boundaries and dip in and out of this thing that may or may not be mine.
yep.
But you don't
Yep.
know because you're just glamorized by what I'm doing. And so I
Yes.
feel like when that's over, people are getting tired of that in so many ways, whether it's fillers, whether it's filters on Instagram, whether it's this government, whether it's all the silly things and
Drake in
misinformation.
blackface. Yeah.
All of that. And when Neptune enters Aries, one of my hopes is that it's wake up. It's a wake
Hmm.
up call for
Hmm.
all of us. Like the inebriation will wear off. There will probably be a long societal hangover, but it will be this coming to reality or dropping of the facade that Drake could be uniquely affected by because I think he is Regulus rising, right? The emperor with no fucking clothes.
Yep. Yeah.
You
We're
can't
very
hide behind
familiar.
things. Yeah, you can't hide behind things in Aries. Aries is very blunt and straightforward. Like Pisces, yeah, you can get lost in the ocean and delude people. Aries, no. Aries is direct. We'll
Yes.
see it. And it'll be in his ninth house, which is visible to the ascendant. It'll be seen.
Or maybe
So
it'll
for
be
him, I
dropped.
feel like it's a derobing moment in a lot of ways. What did you say?
Ooh, a
Yeah.
derobing moment. I love
Yeah.
that. That Scorpio is shaking. That Scorpio is
Yeah.
shaking. You know that's shaking.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Mm. I was gonna say, I feel like that was pretty in-depth discussion so far. I mean, comments are gonna check me, of course, on this, but was there
Be nice in the comments.
be nice in the comments. We're trying to do our best here. Okay. Mercury in Pisces is really, really testing my limits sometimes, but in the best way, in the best way. Any kind of, I guess, residual thoughts, anything we have not covered for both Kendrick, for both Drake, for the hip hop chart, anywhere at all?
Well, for the hip hop chart, something was stunning that I just wanted to point out because you were
Mm,
asking me, like, women in hip hop, that's the true like subject matter that needs to be elevated.
yes.
Venus as the traditional significator of women, right, is in its fall, it's struggling in Virgo. And then Mars, which is the traditional signification of men, is strong in its home sign of Aries and it's at the 29 degree, right? It's so loud. And I
Mm,
feel like this disparity in and of itself shows up in hip hop very loudly.
mm,
And the only other thing that I wanted to bring up, and this is a little bit in the weeds and something that I encourage people to look into, is the Sibley chart of America. So the United
mhm,
States has a natal chart and it happens to have a Cancer stellium. And I think so much of what is going on with Drake and so
mm,
much of what is going on with Kendrick Lamar and even his Super Bowl performance was like, I'm exposing like these hidden nasties that are just part of American culture. That's why I think this is becoming so elevated. It's beyond a rap beef. Everyone has an opinion across the world because it's hitting America where it hurts. Like
mhm,
it's churning something up in this body politic, right? That's bringing up a lot of conversations again about marginalization and who do we respect, who do we disrespect, like all of that. So I just wanted to bring that in, of course, as
yeah.
like these things have tendrils, these things get their hands into many different areas of life, and
Mhm,
astrology is kind of showing how and why and where.
mhm. Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for thank you for that.
Of
That was like really
course.
beautiful. Um, I was gonna say so like part of the reason like why I wanted to do this episode again is because well one there's a lot to talk about and add on even from an astrological perspective of course but I think I got really annoyed at responses from people post Kendrick's Super Bowl performance. Like I was a huge
Wow.
fan and
What
as
are
you
people
were.
saying? I haven't seen the negatives.
More just the negatives are from this part of the internet that,
Mm.
lean more progressive, quote unquote. It's like, oh, Kendrick not talking about genocide, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
And this is the biggest platform to do it. And there was like a protester who had a flag on the field as well, and like part of the
Mm.
team or whatever, right? And it is really, to me, like Kendrick is a vessel in so many different ways, because it's not just about him actually storytelling, it's about the stories that are projected onto him as part of this narrative as well. And the biggest comparison has been like, oh, but Macklemore has been doing so much for this activism. And I'm like,
Mm.
we would need to all go back to 2014 when Kendrick Lamar lost Best Rap Album to
Mm.
Macklemore. Like, if we want to talk about like Kendrick is here operating in this system, standing on business and doing what he needs to do, and people and like audience response on things, it's like, please just
Yeah.
like have a conversation. It's not binary like that. It can everything contains multitudes, and
It's
to sin
intersectional. Yes.
oh
Yes.
my
The work
god.
he did at the Super Bowl, like,
Mhm.
I've seen Palestinians dancing to Not Like Us. Like, you don't have to
Yeah.
explicitly address something in order to address something. And I
Mhm.
similarly have issues with people who lean progressive or liberal, like policing the fuck out of other people who are liberal and progressive for not
Mhm.
being the perfect advocate or not
Mhm.
being the perfect activist. Like,
Mhm.
Kendrick is doing his work in his lane. That's what it looks like for
Mhm.
him. Like, if
Mhm.
your work in your lane is Palestine, please go for it. Love it. Like, we
Mhm.
don't all have to be doing the same thing at the same time to be affecting massive change worldwide. And God, Not Like Us just has so much to do about the encroachment of territory and
Mhm.
genocide, like just in a spiritual, symbolic way.
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't
Yeah.
like that.
No, I agree.
And he made a huge point at the Super Bowl. The president was there. He's talking about 40 acres and a mule. Be
literally.
serious. And I think, and this is maybe a cool place to end because I know we've talked about Beyonce too. He's doing
Yes.
the Libra Rising playbook, which is no, I'm not going to address it directly. I'm putting it in the art. I'm putting
Oh,
it in visuals, right? It's there if you want to consume it. Like, what do you mean I'm not talking about it? You're just not receiving
oh,
it.
I am
Yeah.
you cannot I cannot stress how happy that made me that you like obviously
Yeah.
bring up Beyonce. I mean, it's Black History Month, so very
Yeah.
deservedly show, but like yes, the Libra Risings are putting on a masterclass in how art and activism can really intersect and can really bring everyone along for the ride and bridge
Yes.
divide.
Yes. And do you imagine if he was much more divisive? Imagine if he was much more, loud and was doing all these things, right, that the advocates want him to do. It would not have been as well received. It would not have been as wide received. Like there's an intelligence with Libra. It's like I know how to create common ground. And he did that.
Mhm.
It's the most watched Super Bowl halftime show of like all time. Be so serious. He's doing
Uh,
his work. I don't
that
like that.
Jupiter station is just
Right.
giving abundance,
Right on
abundance,
top of his
abundance.
Venus too, ruler of the ascendant. Like,
Ninth house.
yeah.
Oh, so freaking good. So freaking good. But oh my gosh. Well, I had such a blast
Me too.
coming back, doing it again. Very retrograde-y, very, very much so, even though it's not the
We're
season
part of the
yet.
cycle too, Tasha.
We are part of the cycle. All right.
We're
See,
commenting on it, but we're in it.
we're all that Mars in Drake's chart, right? So we're going to
Big
be a
time.
part of the ride. We're going to be part of the
Yes.
story. But anything you would like to offer, promote? This is your moment.
This is my moment. The first thing I would say is just protect federal workers. Just pay
Mhm.
attention to what's going on in our
Mhm.
country. Again, this is not out of left field. I feel like so much about what Kendrick is commenting on has a lot to do with the way that America is going right now. So that'll be
Yeah.
my first thing. Just look up how you can get involved. Like the government is important. The other thing I would say is if you like what you heard, go ahead and book a reading if you wanna.
Hey.
And I'll be doing more talks about my research into Neptune and the Black Connection. So I hope to have a lot more content there that people can dig into.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And where can people find you on Instagram?
Yes, I'm mainly on Instagram at Millie Michelle, MILLYMICHELLE. No longer
Ah,
on Twitter. Won't support that.
yeah, that's very fair. That is very fair. Well, thank you for tuning in to the very first episode of the Pop Astrologist Presents. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and leave us a note if you love the episode. See you next time.